Relations between the US and China have become so bad lately that short of going to war, a possibility that cannot be ruled out, it might seem the situation cannot get any worse. Yet what if China were to declare a trade and wider economic war against the United States and others? This scenario was suggested recently by a prominent Chinese academic teaching in Tokyo. If the already worrying deceleration in the growth of world trade were to turn into an actual decline as big hitters like China join the zero-sum game of protectionism, it would affect global growth and employment and invite recession, thus breeding economic or even real confrontation. Until quite recently, it would have been almost unthinkable that China would risk shooting itself in the foot by declaring a trade war on the United States, the country to which it exports the most goods and which is a major source of imports, or on other nations. But the world is changing rapidly, and the idea of maximizing economic advantage is being overshadowed by a growing obsession with economic security. Global trade growth is slowing, a trend that applies especially to United States and China trade. If trade does become further weaponized and China copies the protectionist example of the United States and other major economic partners, Beijing does have a secret weapon to deploy. It could devalue the yuan sharply, some analysts suggest. Veteran Japan analyst Jesper Cole, for example, has suggested China could devalue the yuan by 20-30% this year to counter currency depreciation elsewhere. While Beijing might once have hesitated to take such action, it would have stronger reason to do so in an economic war. Global trade is becoming so disrupted that almost anything seems possible as major powers, especially United States, reach for tariffs, sanctions, or any other weapon they can use to protect themselves, risking major economic harm to others. A recent International Monetary Fund report noted that as part of a backlash against free trade that has been building for almost a decade, some of the world's largest economies have made choices to halt further international integration and, in several instances, to embrace protectionist or nationalist policies. The United States, as the world's largest importer of goods, has the most power to use trade as a weapon, and indeed has been doing so since former President Donald Trump launched his trade wars against China and others. His successor Joe Biden has taken the assault to new heights, or rather depths. But China, as the world's second largest importer, also has real power to retaliate using trade and other economic barriers. Two can play the same game. As the IMF said in this month's Finance and Development Report, protectionism could make the world less resilient, more unequal, and more conflict-prone. Just as war is an extension of politics, as Prussian General Karl von Clausewitz once noted, so real wars can be an extension of trade wars, especially when a nation feels as cornered as China may be. All's fair in love and war, it is said, and there's little love lost now between China and the US. Just which of these two and other major trading nations would lose most from an intensification of global trade wars, and which economic sectors would lose most from such hostile encounters, is a subject worthy of more intensive study as sentiment and on-the-ground conditions continue to deteriorate. The value of world trade as a proportion of global gross domestic product has more than doubled since 1970 to reach almost 57% by 2021. According to World Bank data in top trading nations such as China, the United States, Canada, Britain, and India, as well as the European Union, all stand to lose the most from intensified trade wars. China perhaps has more to lose than the US from taking a more aggressive approach to trade actions. Exports of goods and services account for some 20% of China's GDP versus around 11% for the United States. But here again, what applies in economic peacetime does not necessarily apply in economic wartime. When so-called national interest tends to take precedence, and when economic security concerns are uppermost in policymakers' minds, rationale often triumphs over reason. China's major trading partners, apart from the US, include South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Vietnam. European nations and Australia, perceived as United States allies, could be more vulnerable to China's countermeasures in a trade war. The potential fallout from an intensified trade confrontation between China, the United States, and other nations is difficult to calculate. Let us delve deeper into the key sectors and economies that could be most affected by hostile encounters. Automotive industry. The United States is a major exporter of automobiles and integrated circuits to China, Japan, and South Korea. Any escalation in trade tensions could disrupt the automotive supply chain and hamper the growth of this industry, impacting both manufacturing manufacturers and consumer. Technology sector. China is a significant exporter of broadcasting equipment, integrated circuits, office machinery, and telephones. These products are primarily exported to the United States, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, and Germany. An economic war could lead to disruptions in the global technology market and hinder innovation in technological advancements. Agricultural trade. The U.S. and China have a substantial agricultural trade relationship. If trade tensions worsen, it could have detrimental effects on the agricultural sector in both countries, affecting farmers, food security, and global food prices. Energy sector. The United States is a major exporter of petroleum and petroleum products. China, Japan, and South Korea are among its biggest markets. Any disruptions in this sector due to trade wars could impact energy prices and global energy security. Financial markets. Escalating trade tensions between the United States and China could create significant volatility in financial markets, affecting investor confidence, stock prices, and the stability of global financial system. The perils of an escalating trade war between the United States and China are far-reaching and pose significant risks to global economic stability. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, protectionist measures and trade barriers can have severe consequences for all nations involved. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel and write your opinion in the comments.